All right, coming back to GIF animations after a long weekend and after we had set up two separate Photoshop files to work with. I have them both here. I have my assets file, which is like a treasure trunk of puppet parts and backgrounds, and I have my stage. The stage is where all the magic happens. Now I know there's a lot more understanding of how animation works now because of DVDs and the extras and the behind the scenes. But the way that I have you setting up frame by frame GIF animating within Photoshop is most similar to stop motion animation. And stop motion animation, maybe the most familiar would be kind of the claymation of Tim Burton and The Nightmare Before Christmas. So, or if you like Nick Park stuff, like Wallace and Gromit, that's kind of what I think of. But basically, let's look at that. Actually, I'll look at one of my friends. He did a really great one. Hopefully it's still up. And let's see, Hello Kitty. He did it for a Hello Kitty memorial show. So much online. How can there be more than one Simon Chow Hello Kitty video? Yeah, it's not that one. All right. Anyway, let's look at the process. What he did, which was so great, was he took claymation and he made like this, these clay figures of Hello Kitty and her friends playing video games, and then she turned them all into like this Hello Kitty Voltron mashup. It was great. Anyway, how do you do that? Well, you have to sculpt each frame separately. So if you were making this out of clay, you would have to sculpt each one of those and pose them separately. So these are called your assets. And then you set them up on a stage like this. And on your stage you might have different backgrounds, different paper cutouts, like in this example, like early South Park episodes. And then you have to rearrange it, take the photo, do the next one. Rearrange it, take the photo, do the next one. So that's why we're setting up with two different Photoshop files, because we're imitating this through animation, through Photoshop's animation capabilities. So if you look, this animation is simply done and very smoothly done through taking individual photos that she sets up here of these paper cutouts. And they can look digital, they can look really cool, but this is all done by hand. Right. She has little grommet dolls that have pinpoints, and that means she can move those around and pose them to give the illusion that that character is walking. This is called a walking test. She has different assets here that she can use in the environment and have them move across. And so this is a studio that does things that look very digital, but do it all by hand just through cutouts of paper and a photograph. And we can imitate that with GIF animation. Yeah, nice stuff. Okay. Give that hand-done quality. And that's what's so fun about GIFs, is that they're very hand-done. They don't look like smooth special effects. Okay, so far in my stage, this is where my final frames go. And so my stage, the first frame I have is the backdrop. And this is the backdrop. And then on top of that, I have my posed puppet characters. So my first pose was to have my guy entirely hidden in his shell, like a hermit crab. Then his shell starts to wiggle, so I just move it back and forth on a few different layers. And then he starts to come out. And his claw pops out. And then his head and his other claw and his leg pop out. And then he starts to move, and his claw starts to open, and his mouth starts to open. Looks kind of scary there. And then he starts to scamper along, scamper along. And then on top of it all, I have this shading filter, which will run on every layer. Now, how can I test this? Because this is only the first beginning of my sketch. Right? It's only that he's out of his shell and he's just starting to move. So I've done about 4 frames here. But now I have a big action where he shrinks back inside of his shell. Now, in order to make all of those happen, I built my assets. And so here's my assets file, which is much bigger because my landscape's much bigger. And on that, I have a creature walk cycle now that I'll just go and work with over and over when I need to make the creature walking. But then I also have all the different elements of the creature separately that I can move like a grommet puppet. You know, different legs, different jaws, different heads. And of course, him all tucked into his rock body. What I call the creature core. All right. And then I have shadow assets. And then I have the background. But along with the background, I have some assets of foreground mist, of the upper clouds, of this big rock, which I might use, foreground dust, the foreground rock I might use. So all of that might come into play. But for now, I want to understand the interaction between my assets and my stage and my sketch. So I'm going to keep my sketch open and kind of tucked into the corner here so I can refer to it when I need to. And just to remind you, once we have final frame shot on our stage, then we can run through an animation test using the timeline tool. And we make frames from our layer. Make frames from layers, like so. And we can set them up. So I can set the first frame up to have the background and to have the first image, and that's it. I can set the second frame up to have the background, have the second image, and that's it. The next frame, the next frame, the next frame. And so on. And I can treat all of them the same by selecting them all. And then I can set timing for them. And then I can play it through and test it. The problem is, as you're building it, you need to have this empty. So I'm going to keep building before I test anymore. So this was the last frame I had. And it's right here on my project. But now, I'm going, because he's reached the middle of the frame, I'm going to start doing 2 things at once. I'm going to start moving my background plate and just having the character walk in place. So this is kind of cool. So what I'm going to do is bring in the whole walk cycle. And how do I bring that in? I take that whole group that I saved and I drop it on top here. And now I'm going to turn everything on. It's up in the corner there. That's my creature walk cycle. I have the whole folder selected, so that means every asset layer within there. I'm going to use the move tool. Whoops, let me turn this off. for now. And I'm going to move all of them down. Gotta select them all. So hold down Shift, select everything in that one folder. Move them all down on top of this. So they are positioned. And now I get into my walk cycle, which I can use just by repeating over and over these 5 frames and have this character walk as much as I want. All right, so what is my next frame? It's this, but then it's also the background moving over slightly. So I made a duplicate of the background plate, and now I'm going to move it over just a tiny bit. That was too much. Go back to the beginning. I just used my arrow keys. I'm going to move it over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. Okay. Then I'm going to make a duplicate of it. I'm going to move it over 10 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Duplicate it, Command J, move it over 10 steps again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And again. Fun, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is why animators need assistance. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Until I get to where I want in the background. Remember, I'm making a duplicate each time of the background plate. Now, if I accidentally go 11 times, that's no big deal. If I accidentally do 9 times, it's no big deal. It's a GIF animation, doesn't need to be perfectly smooth. But this is how you do a pan. And I want to go far enough that I can get to the rock where I have foreground and background. That is a big landscape. This is a slow-moving creature. And this is what video games have trained you for, hitting that arrow key as fast as you can. Now, why am I using the arrow key instead of just dragging it with the mouse? Because I don't want the camera to be unsteady, unless I do want the camera to be unsteady. But this will imitate what's called a tracking shot, like a very smooth dolly shot that moves over. Now, I could just leave my creature the same for all of it, and it would look like he's flying. But I'm not going to do that. The reason I'm keeping the background and the character separate, as separate assets, even on my stage, is so that I can do a walking test, the walking cycle, while I'm moving the background. Oh, we are getting so close. All right, and then he's going to climb on top of this rock. All right. So that is a lot. That last move is quite heavy, but we'll just go with it. I'll put one in between. So it's all about composing the space.